Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading Crossbow. We're on season 2. I'm so excited, but first, my co-host, Rob.
Hey, Lana, and I am excited to talk to you today about this very special book that you selected for us. My very first Sarah J Maas book. And,
Yeah.
I don't know if I really understood what I had coming.
Yeah, no, it's a lot, right? Like, I feel like Sarah J Maas has like the 800-page book area covered. She tends to write 800-page books. Don't know why, but like every book in this series. So this is Crescent City, book 1, House of Earth and Blood. I think it's 800 and I don't know, 3 pages. If you look at book 2, it's like 807 pages or something like that. Book 3, 804 pages. It's like people kind of make fun of her about this because it's like, is this your magic number that you have to get to? Because like this could have been a 500 or 600 page book. This is a comment I hear all the time, but nope, have to get to the magic 800 pages. Not sure why, but anyway, I should do a quick summary
Yeah,
of this book.
of course.
For anyone that's not familiar with it. So, quick summary is we have our main character, Bryce Quinlan. She's like a halfling of sorts. She's half human, she's half fae, and she lives in a world of humans and Vanir. And Vanir are basically like magical creatures. You know, there's vampires in this world, there's werewolves, there's fae, there's mermaids, there's witches, there's sorcerers, there's sprites, and they all live in different sort of subsections of Crescent City. And they all have their own kings and queens, but they all work together, they all have representatives in Crescent City. So, Bryce, our main character, she's kind of lost. She's a college girl. She's a partier. And that's where we start with her at the beginning of the book. She's trying to find herself, and she's quite literally running with a pack of wolves, which is sort of unheard of because wolves only like to run with their packs, but she fits in. Her best friend Danica is the alpha of these wolves. As you can imagine, it is a Sarah J Maas book. Things go awry. World falls apart. Bryce Quinlan has to get her power. She has to find her power. In this series, they call it making the drop. If she survives the drop, she'll be immortal, and she'll basically be embracing more of her fae. So there's a lot of complications that come with this story. She finds a love interest. Royalty is involved. Her brother is full fae royal. And I'm going to stop it there. But it's typical Sarah J Maas fae stuff. And this one's only a bit different than some of the others in the fact that she's already half fae from the beginning, which usually in her books, they have to fall in love with someone on the fae side in order to become fae. So, hey, props to Sarah J Maas for giving her some fae blood from the beginning.
Okay.
So I have to know, that was a terrible plot summary. I know it's bad. People might eat me up for that, but you know what? There's actually a lot, and we try not to go too spoilery. We might have to just say spoiler alert before we do that on this episode, and then we'll like maybe put a bookmark on it. But like there's a lot in here. It's 800 pages. I didn't want to spoil it. I have to know. High level, what did you think about your first Sarah J Maas book, Rob?
I think I had a picture in my head of what a Sarah J Maas book was gonna be like, and I really think I misunderstood, because if I had to describe this, I would say this book was kind of like going on a carnival cruise. There's a lot of pretty sights, a whole lot less sex than you expected, and then a whole lot of shit. Like the poop cruise.
The poop cruise? No, it's not that bad.
I'm
already on the second book. I have like 60 pages left. I bought all 3 of them. I can't wait.
Yeah, and I'm really glad. So for the audience to know, since Lana got a little bit of a head start reading this book, I was able to just borrow her copy. And that definitely saved me, the shame of having to buy this book.
$32 or however much these are. Oh my gosh. This book is $42 in Canada. Can you believe that? Okay, and I was right on the money. $32. So worth it. Every penny. That's like what? 10 cents every page or something? That was
Yeah, so I guess to just kind of talk about the book a little bit, let's I want to start off with maybe the way it's written, the prose. Like, how is this book kind of written? Because I kind of feel like that's where a lot of my issues lie. So, in a lot of our past reviews, we've talked a little bit about, when a book is really good when it can kind of show, not tell you the plot. This book tells you, and then tells you some more. Oh, what the hell? Who are we kidding? It's going to tell you some more. This first, third of this book is almost so overloaded with exposition. It's not just an info dump. It's like an info landfill. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, no. Okay, we should do a bit more plot summary real quick before we get into the landfill of convoluted plot dumping that you so laid on me here.
Okay.
So before we dive into all that, I think that I should have done a little bit of a better job with the plot, because someone just jumping in right now after what you just said would be like, why would I even pick up this book? So I should say that there's a war building between the humans and the Vanir. The Vanir are they have power, right? And the humans don't. So there's a struggle, and the humans have done some interesting things with warfare that I thought you would like, which it feels very like Warhammer. They're making mech suits, and they're creating weapons of kind of more mass destruction because they're trying to take on the Vanir. And not only that, but then we have a more celestial type of governing body called the Asteri. And then also within all of this, all of these creatures, we have archangels even, and fallen angels even. And it's really an interesting world, a war-ridden world, or on the brink of war between these factions. And then even within the Vanir, we have, multiple factions in different levels, right? Sprites, which there's sprites in this book, a wonderful sprite, actually. And there's some of the lowest, and the, mer people and such. And really, Bryce steps into a complicated story of mystery and drugs and trafficking and slavery, and it's actually quite interesting. And at some point, she has to use her powers to help heal this corruption and really put some archangels in their place. So when I say it like that, I don't know where you're coming up with this landfill stuff, because that is a thick plot.
Yeah, so we'll get back to thick later.
Oh shoot! Okay, I had that coming. That was good. That was good, Rob.
So
that's what she said.
Yeah. So what Lana's describing there was something like 16,000 years ago. All of these, let's call them the Vanir, they invaded this world where the humans lived. They all came through rifts from other places. This is very much like, comic book Asgard. It's just they all came in, and then the elves came in, and then the angels came in, and all of them decided to just, instead of, wanting to humanity to believe and worship them, they were like, nope, you guys, the humans are all of our slaves going forward, and we're going to have this really cosmopolitan government. And that was 16,000 years ago. So for almost as long as human recorded history, they've been basically just stomping on humans. And, there's good reason why the humans are a wee bit mad about that.
Yes, and then in this story also, one of the main characters named Hunt, he was, since he's Vanir, he's lived I don't know how many hundreds of years. So we do have that whole love interest person living a long time. That is part of Sarah J Maas' story, but he's already fought in a human versus Vanir war. And that's prior to this book, but we get snippets of the war, and in which he lost. And so this has been going on a long time, but that was one major plot moment where they lost. There's a rebellion. So some of the Vanir are on the human side, and we should say that they don't they feel like they're being treated very poorly. They don't have what the Vanir have. They don't have powers, and so they're sympathizers.
Maybe. They at least
Maybe.
they at least don't like the current leadership. At least.
Huh.
But I guess to get back to what I meant about the exposition. In the first third of this book, the book is very heavily loaded with exposition. And it's because it's trying to convey this very large backstory to the reader. I would even go so far as to say almost 2 out of every 3 sentences are backstory in that first third of the book, where there's a paragraph, there's actually a chapter a good ways into this book where the lead character, Bryce, she comes home from a really tough day, and she just like takes off her bra and like kicks up her feet and just tries to relax for a minute, just let the weight of the day settle off of her. And this moment like stood out to me because I was like, was that a whole paragraph without exposition? Like, it was just explaining what the current moment was happening for just a whole paragraph. And that was amazing. Like, it stood out, but that it was so surprising. Now, the payoff, or the payback, was the following chapter. The other lead character, Hunt, is trying to take a shower. That's all he does. He just takes a shower. Nothing happens in the shower. He's not even thinking about it, but it gives his whole backstory and why he's in his current situation and what these tattoos mean and who his past love interest was. It's a giant chapter with about maybe 4 sentences of him taking a shower. All of which gets repeated later in the book in story when him and Bryce are talking. And I found that to be frustrating. And if I hadn't been forced to read this, I might have stopped before that. However, to be clear, once you get past that first third, it definitely drops off. And when you get to the last third, there's almost no exposition. But that first third, I struggled.
Yeah, this is common. I mean, I'm going to have to sympathize with you here. And even before this episode, I'm like, I'm going to read some Goodreads. I'm going to read some reviews. By the way, reviews on these types of books are hilarious. They're so good. And I try to read like a couple bad ones. I try to read, of course, the highest rated ones. And that is common. And some people word this as like plot convenience too. Like she's almost making up for the fact that she's wanting to write a great big story. She has all these thoughts to put out. She's a big world builder, great at writing characters. And then while all this is happening, I almost feel like she needs to kind of like reiterate to herself that she's doing it right. I don't know how to explain that because I enjoy these books. And when I was reading, I know the shower scene you're talking about. Like, to me, that's just like someone drifting in their mind while they're just like, if you ever sat underneath a shower and you just sit there and like feels really good and like just, I don't know. It's just like, I thought the going out of that was fine.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But it wasn't, where I had the argument on that specific chapter was, it was not like he was thinking about these things. It was just being like, I need to explain some stuff about his backstory so that you don't get confused. Because It's not like he was reminiscing about the bad old times when, things went very badly for him. It was just, he was just taking a shower. And then, like I said, later on, he does actually explain his point of view and what happened to him, to Bryce. And I think the reason why is because this Sarah J Maas, at least from what I can tell, she very much follows one of the many rules of 3 in writing. And there's a whole bunch of different rules of 3. Just one of them is you say something, or introduce some information, remind the reader about that information, and then pay it off. And then you get the payoff of that. This would be the moment like at the very beginning of a movie, you might see a cop maybe holster a pistol at his ankle. And then about midway through, you might get reminded that pistol is there. And then in the climax of the movie, draws that pistol and uses it. He never actually got to use it before, but that's the kind of rule of three I'm talking about. And she very much does this with a lot of stuff in this book. The very beginning, there's a big exposition that introduces it. There's a spot in the middle that basically reinforces the idea or reminds you that it's there. And then near the end, you get the payoff. And so I feel like it was very intentional. I just, like I said, it was a tough start to the book for me.
Takes her a while to get going, and this might help you too. One thing that she did in her ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses series, is she does a lot of bonus chapters. Now, it depends. Sometimes this could be like a book you got from Walmart, for example. It'll contain the bonus chapters. Now, I kind of hate when authors do this because it means like to get those bonus chapters, people are buying other books. It's kind of like people making fun of like Taylor Swift albums because like there's this different version and this different version. Like Billie Eilish recently made a ton of fun of her about it. Like, you're just making people buy more albums. Well, similar to buy more books. She does publish them online, though, so you don't have to buy the other books. But the reason why I bring that up is because these are very character-rich stories. She has so many characters in them, and it goes so wide that typically what she does, or has done in the past, is she builds in mystery to these characters, and she answers them in other books. Like, we know this is going to be a series. We know there should be a fourth book at least. And so if she'd followed the path of her other books, we get these bonus chapters and explain something. And that's really nice. And it's almost like an Easter egg hunt. You find the chapters and they're fun to read. Now, you're not on the second book, and I doubt you'll read it. But I feel like I should let people know watching this that the second book does a really good job of taking care of the thing that you're having a problem with, which is like Danica in this book, which is Bryce's best friend, has a lot of mystery around her. It does not get solved in this book. It's intentionally skipped. We don't get a lot of backstory. We don't find out it all. There's a ton of Easter eggs in here that she set up that I didn't even pick up on until I got to the second book. And I'm like, oh, cool. Where she should have done that with Hunt.
Okay.
I think that those moments should have been bonus chapters or like, you know, the Hunt chapter or things that Sarah J Maas does that us readers have come to appreciate or at least revisited them in another book. So I give you that. Well, too much in some areas.
So now you talked about your characters and how you feel like they're really well developed. And in the case of Bryce, for example, I think the book goes out of its way to remind you over and over that her most important character trait is her Tigbitties, Golden Globes, or Sweater Puppies, Starsky and Hutch, as well as her big badonkadonk.
Yeah, so I knew you'd say that.
I mean, this is a world where everyone looks like is a size 0 supermodel. And I mean everyone.
Everyone.
And she's like Kim Kardashian as far as body type. And the book wants to remind you at every moment that if Sir Mix-a-Lot was here, he would be a huge fan of Bryce. Because everyone is just eyeballing her, like, at every moment. And it's weird because they all also treat her like crap because of her heritage, you know, where all that body proportions come from. And it's almost this weird, like, racist sexual objectification that this book really is commenting on. And I don't know, but it feels like it's brought up so much in this book about her appearance. In fact, that's a big part of the early plot is how people's views of her appearance affect how they treat her.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to completely agree with you. This is a part of Sarah J Maas books I absolutely hate. And this happens in a ton of her books. Everyone's gorgeous. Everyone has rock hard abs. Everyone's golden and sun-kissed too for some reason. And like they're all just beautiful. And it's seriously every single book. There was like a breath of fresh air in the ACOTAR series where there's this, I can't remember. It's been a while since I read that. I think she's a witch or a part witch, and she kind of lives into like kind of slavery. And she's plain. Like she's quite plain. She comes into herself more as she gets into her power more. But like that was one of my favorite characters to read, and I forget the name of her. But like for the most part, I really dislike how Sarah J Maas has to make every single person gorgeous.
It's weird because I feel like the target audience of this book really is women, and yet the way this book describes its lead character repeatedly is a very strong, like, stereotypical male gaze. And as a guy, I found that to be very interesting. Like, I didn't expect that. I was expecting a whole lot more description of Hunt, kind of like you get in Fourth Wing, where a lot of the description is about the male lead because this is targeting a female audience. Whereas this book, very much the opposite, just describing, her yacht, I guess is the popular term now.
Yes. So this is the part where I'm going to say spoiler. Little spoiler, so we'll put a flag up here. Mm-hmm. It's not too bad of a spoiler, so if you want to listen through this, I promise it won't ruin the book. There's 800 pages. It can't ruin it that much. Now, I agree with you. She does this too much. It's annoying. It's annoying to readers. It's not the first series she's done this. Okay? But then again, I have to say there is something different about Bryce. And this is different from all the other SJM books, where I think it has something to do with her power. So she does have to make the drop. She has to make the drop to come into her power so she can have like the immortal life for being Fae, right? This is very dangerous. Not everybody survives it.
Now, she's actually chosen not to do this prior, because she had planned to do this in a few years from in the future. That's why she hasn't done it. She had planned to do it because when you do it, you basically freeze your appearance for the rest of your life, which could be hundreds of years. You're not going to really age anymore. So she wanted to wait till she was about 27 so that that's the appearance. She didn't want to be too young when she did it.
And not just that, there's like a really great relationship with her best friend Danica, and they have their own reasons together to do it, and they're just not done partying and having fun. She's just not that serious yet. So they made it clear for that too. But this is the spoilery part, not about the drop, but like she's going to come into her power at some point in this story. So her power is related somewhat to that governing body I told you about, the Asteri. That basically means like of stars. They're basically like star people. So her power is related, so that's spoilery. And these Asteri people have something about them that people are drawn to. And this particular power is so freaking rare that like it's just like magic shiny. So I have a feeling that that's a little bit to do with it, and also partially because in a later book they actually make a comment on it of like everybody actually is drawn to her. Everybody does feel like they want her kind of, and I think it's related, but I'm not fully sure yet. So just tiny asterisk.
Aside from Bryce's appearance, I struggled a little bit with the characters, a little bit kind of like Swordcatcher, where I felt like I struggled to find a character who just demonstrates just an ounce of personal growth from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. Most of the characters are fundamentally the same. The biggest difference as far as like a change in character, as far as their personality, their worldview, that kind of thing, is the two lead characters, Hunt and Bryce. They essentially are able to finally just move on from their personal grief just by finding one other person in the world who doesn't treat them like a pile of shit. And it's each other. Other than that, there's not enough character growth from me, from even just the side characters. Like, just so many of them are fundamentally the same at the beginning versus the end. And I kind of struggled with that a bit.
And you're going to get that. I'm going to agree with you there too. So Sarah J Maas is a really good world builder. You're going to find that through the second book. I shouldn't say Rob's going to find that. Rob probably won't read the second book. But readers who have know that she plans out her series like start to finish. For example, there's a boyfriend at the very beginning of this book who works at like some tech company. And like, I'm like, okay, this is going to come into play. It doesn't in book one. Like a little bit, okay? Because it's like this whole tech thing with magic we'll talk about later. But like, it's going to happen later. So you're not going to get the payoff on a book one of the series with characters. You're just not. Okay. I can say for people who are interested, Rune, which is Bryce's brother, has tremendous growth in book two and is really, really cool. We get a lot of growth there. And then I'm forgetting his name, Ethan. It is one of the Wolfpack members in the story. He's the sunballer who likes to, I'm guessing that's like a version of baseball. I'm not exactly sure what the
Yeah.
game is. Yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
I got baseball from it too, but yeah,
I thought
it's
maybe
not clear.
baseball. No, not clear. Basically, think of it as like Crescent City's Quidditch, sort of, but with like, veneer. Anyhow, so that character, which we barely get in book one, we just know he's like this famous baseballer, so to speak. We get him a little bit. We know he's angry with Bryce because of issues. But in the second book, that character goes from like here, little baseball player, to like caring about like characters he shouldn't care about, like just a lot of growth. So we get
Okay.
that in book two. I don't think you're going to get that from any Sarah J Maas book in book one.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the magic system then, because
Yes.
because
Interesting.
to be honest, I don't really understand this as a magic system like at all. I mean, the only part I get is imagine like if Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z showed up with his scanner and to measure people's power levels, because he says, I mean, objectively say that person has that much power and that person has that much
Yes.
power and that person, oh, not very much power there. But what does that much power mean? I have no idea. Like, I truly have no idea what any of these power levels mean because it's not really demonstrated in this book. Did I?
Okay. It is very hard to pick up on all of this. Again, Sarah J Maas builds the whole world out, knows how many books she's going to write, and then gives you little tiny bits of it. I also thought, what the with this magic system? What the first light? Why is there gates? So let's just explain a few things.
Okay.
So Crescent City itself, Lunathalon, I think is the name of it, has these gates at different points of the city. And we don't know much about them in book one, that they were previously used as like a telecom system. So you can communicate through them magically. So one thing the readers should know, or anyone watching this, is that this is like a hybrid magic. So there's actual magic that doesn't exist so much within the world. You don't get to pull it out of the world like in other books, but exists within you as veneer.
Yeah, the magic was within you the whole time. You just had to discover it.
Sure, Rob. Sure. You're so cynical today. I actually kind of love this. Season 2, we're getting Rob with teeth. um, so anyway, when you make the drop, this is huge to kind of how their technology works. So they take magic and they weave it into their actual technology. When you make the drop, your first light, that's like the magic you release when you're coming into yourself, and going immortal, that is taken from you. So you kind of release this energy. That energy actually powers the city, powers the gates. And then that magic, there's actually a lot more to it we find out in book 2. So we actually know how much it is because we know how much power or energy is released from the person when it happens, because they get this first light. It's actually measurable. And maybe that you could think of it as in like watts for power or something.
Yeah, it's very, very green technology.
Well, who are you? So funny. Okay, so yes, we have this weird kind of like energy thing. And this actually is something, spoiler, I'm going to put up the spoiler thing here, for book 2 can be measured in the underworld as well. So some interesting things here. But and with the Asteri, which is kind of this like governmental being, they have even more of it. And the Asteri is choosing how this power is used. So we have like a governmental body like deciding how you use the power. So it's pretty complicated, but I think that answers why they can measure it, because it's literally like a power meter that's going to raise when someone makes the drop.
Yeah, and they capture it, and as you noted, they actually use that to power their cities and their technology, and also like the person gets like some tokens with a tiny bit of their first light that they can share with friends, and it powers like the lights in your house, just with your little tokens and that kind of stuff. And it's a neat element. It's like I said, as far as the magic system though, it's like, what does this person can do versus this other person that their power level matters. We just don't get it in this book.
Not in this book. Get it a lot more in the second one. And we talked about this earlier as we were reading the book, but I think the idea of this hybrid magic between magic within you and technology and using it as a power source is very, very interesting. And I actually like it a lot, like a lot, a lot. I think it's in the wrong hands. I actually don't like this type of magic in the hands of Sarah J Maas, unfortunately. I actually feel like this type of magic is much better in the hands of, Robert Jackson Bennett, A Tainted Cup. Like that book to me felt very fantasy bridges sci-fi, and we got some weird biopunk stuff. I feel like this, if he could have written that, like it would have been bomb. But like, we get Sarah J Maas. All right, so we have done kind of more of the boring stuff. Let's just be honest. It's boring stuff when it comes to Sarah J Maas. Let's talk about sex, Rob. I mean, I finally gave you a Sarah J Maas book, but I'm actually a little concerned here because should we talk about the lack of sex?
I really had higher expectations as far as the amount of, within this book. And it really didn't exist. Although the hands did. But there really wasn't any.
Yeah, okay, so let's explain this. Okay, so the love interests in this, or the main love story is between Bryce, who has her complicated past. She's part human, she's part fae, and by the way, royal fae. That's not too much of a spoiler, you get that early. And then Hunt, who is a fallen angel. So we have the archangels, which are basically almost god tier when it comes to like veneer that can like live in this city, walk the earth, so to speak. We have the Asteri basically above that. Like angels just have a lot of power, archangels especially. But he's a fallen angel because he was in that previous war where he was a sympathizer with in the rebellion. So he was aiding the humans. That failed miserably for him. He got branded, so gets a tattoo on him, gets a stamp on the wrist, and he has to basically work in slavery. And so complicated relationship. He is appointed to her. We didn't say this. So she witnesses a heinous crime, basically horrible, big nasty bloody murder, and then she's the only person to, like, with her human eye a little bit caught on camera, see who did it. So he's assigned to the case and he has to watch her because she's the only person that can help get some of the intel that they need. She also works for a sorceress, so let's throw that in there. I loved the sorceress, by the way.
Yeah, she's very interesting. Her whole vibe was very compelling.
Yeah, I love that part of the story. But let's get back to the love stuff. So like he's been forbidden off her. Like, don't get into any funny business, right? He's also a slave, and basically he's been given this deal. Okay, so he has to kill so many people on behalf of the Archangel to undo his wrongs that he did in that first big war. So basically he's been told he's been responsible for like 3,000 deaths. So he needs to do that many rites in terms of murder.
Yeah.
For the Archangel. Yeah. Well, wait, let's get back. If you want to visit that, we got to come back to that. But he's been given a bargain. Okay. And so if he keeps his nose clean, he stays out of trouble, he takes care of this deal, watches over Bryce, 10. He gets to do 10 big, bad, nasty murders, and he's off the list. Was it 10?
Thereabouts. 10? Yeah.
Yeah.
Close
enough. Anyway, so he doesn't want to screw this up. But he's drawn to her, as you said, like pretty much everybody else is. She's got the badonka, she's got the tigbitties, as you said. And so he's like trying so hard to keep hands off. And like, he's also Sarah J Maas angel. She loves wings, by the way. Did I tell you that? Sarah J Maas makes all these characters with wings. And also, if you guys haven't read this book yet, those of you who've read ACOTAR, we have a shadow daddy. I forgot to say that. There's a shadow daddy in here. So anyway, he's sworn off of her. They're forced proximity. He has to be basically near her at all times. Also, she is a reformed party girl. So she's like, oh, no sex, drugs, and rock and roll for me.
Well,
right?
Well, to be clear, Bryce does have sex with multiple people in this book. It's all off camera. Later. It's all off camera. It's just referenced. Which, I mean, I'm going to say some missed opportunities.
We did get some. No, there was the bathroom scene. She basically gets shoved against the wall by the lion man. And she says that he totally alpha holes her to death.
Like I said, it was mostly off camera, though. It was just hinted at.
It was in a club. She was drugged up. She's backed against the wall. What more do you want, Rob? Jesus. All right. Back to her and Athalar, though. The big bad thing happens where people die and she witnesses it. After that, which happens fairly early on, she swears off of it. She doesn't do drugs anymore. She doesn't drink. And she hasn't touched anybody since she got wall wrecked by the Lion Man. So, like, she's trying to be a good girl. So we've got that. And then we got Hunt, who's not supposed to touch her. So because of that, we get a lot of the hornies. Yeah. And a lot of it's self stuff. Self-pleasure. We have to keep this YouTube, like, friendly.
Yeah,
I already have to probably bleep out some stuff.
And like I said, even the case with the bathroom thing and their self stuff, it's mostly just commented on. It's like they tell you that this happened, but they don't really have it happen in the story for the reader. There is one spot.
There's one scene.
Which is really awkward. But it's well written. I will say, it's a very well written scene.
It was a nicely done scene, and I think that's because she teased us for, like, I don't know, 600 pages. I don't know where it happens in the book. I'm not saying it happens at page 600, but like her and Hunt and her and back and forth, and he wants her and he's in the shower taking care of himself, and she's like, you know, and then finally kind of it still doesn't happen. I'm going to say that. It still doesn't happen, but other stuff happens. And you're like, whoa. And it was pretty off the charts good for it not even going to where it could have gone.
Yeah. No.
But it was in an awkward moment.
And like I said, it's just a really unexpected desert of sex in this book. And
a lot of the hornies.
A lot. Yeah. And, you know, I like I said, I had an expectation, and this book didn't quite hit that level.
Well, and to be fair, if I can find it, I'll bring it up on our screen here. But I had texted you an excerpt, or I think I sent you like a TikTok of like a scene, someone reading a scene out loud. But I sent it from the second book. I thought it was the first book because someone had just said Crescent City. So this book says Crescent City really big, and the words of the actual book name are just really small, and you can barely read them. So I actually thought the first book was just called Crescent City. I didn't realize it was House of Earth and Blood. So I sent you the wrong TikTok video. But anyway, so you know how I told you that Sarah she knows her plot and she spans it over 4 books. So all that character growth, it does come, but later.
Yeah.
She does that with the sex too.
So
book 2 is
it comes
crazy.
Just later.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. We should move on past this because I really do want to cover something that I thought was interesting about the book, because I know this has been like kind of you like helping kind of lead this because, you know, you got to experience Sarah for the first time. But one thing that I thought was very different from her books, just curious how you feel, is I thought the world felt very real to me in terms of what the characters were going through. Like, I felt like this could happen in my world. Now, yes, we didn't get a lot of like growth for the characters yet, but it felt like I'd lived part of this in a way, because like we had the college parties, and the college party felt, and I was immersed in that, like the beer pong table and the giant archangel penises on the wall and like that behavior, like it just felt like I'd been in that frat house. I probably have been in that frat house, I swear. And then like the main character, she gets cramps and she gets her period, and she's not quiet about it. She lets people know, like, I'm cramping, shut the fuck up. Like, she's outspoken. She doesn't, you know, and I don't know, I felt like this felt super real to me. The connection that she has with Danica, her best friend, I thought was fantastic. I've had that. I'm lucky enough to have that. And to read like a strong best friend, I'll do anything for you even after death kind of partnership is something that I love. And then the mother-daughter relationship. We haven't gone into this too much, but I actually should say parent relationship. Her parents are cool. Her dad is a badass. So I've seen some people say that like they didn't understand how she could come into her power so quick, how she could be such a fast runner when she's running away from like there's a demon in part of the story. But her dad is like a military captain or general and trained her basically. She's like had SWAT training as a human.
And that's where I think I mentioned earlier about the whole rule of three, where you set something up, repeat it, and then you get the payoff. That was a good example of that, where they talked about certain things like, oh, she was raised by this former soldier, and then later on you see her shoot a gun, and people are like, wow, that was actually really good. And then she actually has to like go into combat, and she's no stranger to guns. The book has clearly set her up for this moment. And that's good. That's good writing. It built. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Nothing really comes out of nowhere. In fact, there were spots where I was like, wait, isn't there going to be the payoff is about to happen? Ah, damn it. Didn't happen.
But yeah, so I felt like, I mean, I kind of tangented you a little bit with like the whole father-daughter relationship, assassin cool stuff. But like, I just liked that. I liked that I felt like I'd been in these places. And so setting-wise, like micro settings, like Rune's house, her place, Danica's place, the wolf den, the mother-father relationships, I felt like the author wrote very real.
Now, as much as I've kind of poo-pooed, especially on the book, to be very clear, I think the worst part of this book is it's actually a very fun story. And what I mean about that is like, if you're like me and maybe you struggled with that first part, or maybe there's parts that maybe you disagree with or something like that, the worst part is you're missing out on what might be just a great story, because I really think the core story is actually pretty great, especially that last act, that last third of the book, which is a big, drawn out, essentially action sequence. That whole section was beat after beat, emotionally just gut-wrenching ride. And you wouldn't have got that without all that previous buildup. Now, could that buildup have been maybe done differently? I mean, I don't know. I just wish the whole book was written with the same passion as that last third. Because that last third is amazing. Like, I really, really enjoyed that whole section. I it's hard to explain without getting into spoilers, but like every other chapter, I was like, oh, this feels like the end of an epic movie. And then you get a big emotional moment, and you're like, self-sacrifice type of thing. And then it's like, well, how do you continue? Shit, there's still another 100 pages. How is this book still going? And then it does it again, and then does it again. Like, it has like 4 different false endings, and each one of them is better than the last.
Yeah. I do like that you said that. It is a good story. I think she spent way too much time building it up. We have way too much backstory. We have way too many side stories that could have happened in other books. An example of that is in this book there's a lot of like arranged marriages because there's royalty and there's fae, and this is how they do things. And so one of the arranged marriages, like, we meet that character and they're badass and they're cool, but like I don't think we had to meet them yet. There's just, I feel like, especially now that I'm about done with the second book, we don't get all that many new characters in the second book. We get a good amount, don't get me wrong. And we explore those quite a bit in the second book, but some of the characters in the first book didn't have to happen then. Could have got them in the second book. Didn't need it all. It was just too much. She took too long to get the book going. Once it did, it's great. And then I have to say, like, people say world building, we only get Crescent City and then, like one other area in this book. But the next book takes to like under the sea and like to many other areas. It's really, really cool. We get temples and stuff. So like it just keeps going. So that fast pace bit that you got from the end of this picks right back up. Second book. And it starts off, I think I was surprised that it started off so content rich, so slam beats you up in the face. We're talking explosions, craziness, questions about the magical power, all in the first 50 pages. And my mind's like, excuse me, what, SJM? Excuse me, what? Yeah. Because we did not get that with this book.
Yeah, and I mentioned like where there's always like gut-wrenching, self-sacrifice type of moments. And there's even parts of those moments where I'm like, this is stupid. Like, frustrating. And even then, it's still written so well that like my cold dead heart is just starting to get all weepy because it's such a great scene where these characters are making these, sacrifices for the greater good.
So we've covered a lot. I do want to make sure that we stay true to our core on the show, and we cover something that a lot of our readers like, which is maps. And fantasy books generally have maps. So I just wanted to take a quick, not too much time, taking a look at the map in this book.
All right. So what do you think of this map? Is this everything that you're looking for?
Yeah, this is a Lana map, definitely. It is beautiful. I love my beautiful maps. I will say my first impression of the map was Rob is going to hate this because I kind of hated it. It sort of looks like a pentagram, and I'm wondering why the village is or the city is set up like this. It's kind of in a star, and then you find out later that that's part of the communication system. So I'm not exactly sure if the Asteri set this up. I think they did. That kind of governing celestial type of body of weird people. Kind of Children of the Corn, like, by the way, if you start reading this odd blue-eyed things. So yeah, I thought it was, I didn't love it when I first saw it, just because I'm like, oh, this feels forced to me. But once you kind of read into it more, you find out how they're all connected. It makes sense. But yeah, it's beautiful. It's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good map for helping the reader understand the kind of relative distances and, understand this world. When I first saw it, I was like, ooh, what's in the bone quarter? And
yeah, me too.
But yeah, I thought this was good. It's very effective for a map. Nothing too amazing, but, it's just a city map and it looks good.
Yeah, and it gives us all the things that we've pointed out that we didn't like from some other maps. So it's hitting some other points. Like, we know where Bryce's apartment is. We know where her old house is. We know where she works. Like, you can really find out everywhere that she's going. And then there's also some maybe little Easter eggs on here, too, that we don't fully understand. So, like, it marks the Angel's Gate, the Merchant's Gate, the River Gate. And really only one or two of these gates, one in particular, comes into play in this story that had like a big moment. So I imagine the other ones will at some point. I love that we get like the Dead Gate, and the Dead Gate is connected into all of this. So I think I don't even have that much of that in the second book, but you get a little bit of it. So I like that there are somewhat of Easter eggs in here too. The Black Dock stuff is cool, by the way. I think it's interesting that in the book, the Istros River, because we do get this in this book, the Mer people live in it. So they actually share a portion of the river with a dark area of the river. They don't really go there. So, like, I don't know how they get from one section of the Istros to another section of the Istros, because smack dab in the middle of it is, like, the Black Docks and the Bone Gates. But the water's connected. So it's all funky. We get more into the water stuff in the next book, but the actual water book isn't out yet. So the House of Many Waters, that's supposed to be the fourth one. So anyway, very interesting. I think the map's good. It's beautiful. And yeah, I like this one. It confused me at first, but it gets explained.
Yeah, I think it's great for helping the reader. So 2 thumbs up for me.
All right. So let's just do, this was your first Sarah J Maas book. Without going too much into why, we've already talked about it. What would you rate this book, 1 to 5?
So despite my kind of strong criticism about the heavy-handedness of like the information dump, especially in the first half of this book, it is a lot of exposition and it's frustrating. And even like there's these weird plot holes. I mean, there's parts of this book where it's like, is it a plot hole? Like, is this book like have so many plot holes it's like Swiss cheese? Or is it more like a net where it's more whole than story? Like there was a lot of parts, and I found that frustrating as I was reading, so that would make me think that I would rank this very poorly. However, I really just enjoyed the core story, the actual plot, even when I felt like some of the things I was like, you're jumping to some like the characters are jumping to conclusions that don't make sense. Like, I mean, you have a world where one of the main characters, he's an assassin. That's his job. He kills people on behalf of the government. You have all these other powerful characters and people who can just enslave or murder people at will. At the very beginning of this book, you have a human terrorist, a human who is, lesser caste than everyone else, caught in the act, essentially, and they're like, man, there was a legal technicality. I guess we got to let this guy out. I mean, he's a terrorist, and you murder people at will. And powerful leaders of factions can just kill people all they want. And this guy, technical reason, he just gets to go free and cause more mayhem. And I get it. The story tries to explain it, but like, ooh, I struggled with this one. But the story was good. Like the weepy, like those moments, that what I called the Rocky or the Spider-Man moment, where it just tugs on your heartstrings and you really love a certain scene. Those were there and they were good, even when I found them irritating. They're so well written. I enjoyed them.
She's pulling you in. Sarah J Maas is pulling you in.
So I'm gonna have to say 3 for now. I think 3 is fair. I think how well written absolutely offsets my issues that I have with the book, because it is well written. It's a good story.
Yeah, she tends to do that. She tends to, like, all the smut that ends up in some of her books, all this, because she's also known for some plot. I wouldn't say them holes, because they're almost stitched together. It's like that stitch is like barely holding on. Like that's filling the hole, right? Like, so books like this, I read the whole series. I buy into it. So you would think that would be a 5 for me, right? Because I buy into it all. I eat this up. Like, if they made a movie, I'm watching it. Series, I'm watching it. Like, I'll buy the freaking t-shirt. I don't care. I love these books. It's not a 5 though. And that's because there was some holes that are just too loosely stitched for me. And one of them is Bryce making the drop, which we've brought up. I'm not going to say how she makes it, not going to say how she gets through that, but one of the things is you have to have an anchor. When you drop and you make that commitment, you have to have something that anchors you to the world while your body is going through this process. And that happens in a way that to me is just like sketchy. Okay, sure, whatever. So I'm not going to say why, but I had big issues with that. Another big issue I had with the plot was there's a character in the story that does something that is so punishable. Like, you should be punished very, very badly. Like, this is huge offense. We're going to do the worst thing ever to you. And basically, like, it's a part of their body gets cut off. But they're immortal. And this is, like, crazy in the story that this happens. They build it up so much. Oh, no. And he heals in, like, 3 days. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, this is supposed to be... What? They make it sound like the worst thing that could possibly happen to the creature is this. And then, like, the character can actually still, like, fuck around, too. I'm like, what?
But it's, like, torturously itchy. Like,
oh, yeah. It's super itchy. Yeah.
While it grows back.
I hate that. While it grows back. So that whole part, like, I was cringing through it. Like, you built this up to be the worst possible thing. So it's not a plot hole necessarily. It was just, like, weak. Yeah. So spots like that in the book really, really bugged me. But the heart feelsies, the warm and fuzzies, right? Also, the sexual tension's fantastic to read. I love that. We had a lot of that in Dragonfall. No sex happened in Dragonfall either. But the tension was great. So great tension in this one, too. And then the connections between characters I thought were really well. So it's a 4 for me. It's not a 5. But I look past it because I've had experience with her. Like not A Court of Thorns and Roses, but the Throne of Glass series is actually one of my favorite series of all time. And I don't know how I got through it because the first 2 books, looking back on them, are total dog shit. Like, so bad. The first, and I remember thinking I hated the heroine in the first book. I don't know why I read the second one. I have no idea. But when you get to books 5, 6, 7 in those, it's just like, ugh, chef's kiss. Amazing writing. But I don't know how to tell people to do that in Sarah J Maas books.
Yeah, and I'm just
How she
talking
writes.
about in the first book where I was struggling just to get through part of it.
Yeah.
But like I said, there is a payoff there, and I get why people like this. I absolutely get it. And you know, kudos to this writer, because she knows how to tug on those heartstrings, and I absolutely understand why people love this.
All right, Rob, you made it through your first Sarah J Maas book. It wasn't half bad. It was only a third bad, actually. So thanks for hanging in there with me. And for all of you watching, please make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really helps support the channel, and we appreciate you so much when you do. Also, join our Discord, where we are continuing discussion on our next book, which is Rob's choice, Belle's Hells, and that's a Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yep, Critical Role's prequel to their third campaign.
All right, can't guarantee we're going to have more Sarah J Maas on the show, but I can tell you we'll get some Faye smut on here. So see you next time, everyone.
Thank you all.